There was a man in my sauna. That's how this starts. Not with a fight. Not with a love letter. Not with a suspicious phone call or lipstick on a wine glass. Just a man. In my sauna. Sitting there like he paid rent. He was wearing my robe. And when he saw me, he said the words that have been echoing in my skull ever since. "Oh, I thought you were out of town till Monday." I wasn't. I was home. And my wife, somewhere in that very house, was the one who had told him otherwise. I left for the grocery store. I came back to a stranger. That day started like any other disappointing Sunday. I was out of oat milk, which is basically a disaster when your therapist tells you to develop a routine. So I drove to the co-op down the road, forgot half the list, came back 40 minutes later, and there he was. Steam in the air, robe tied a little too tight, hair slicked back like he belonged on a yacht, not in my home-built cedar box behind the laundry room. I didn't say anything. I walked past him, into the house, and everything felt wrong. The smell of her perfume, stronger than usual. Her phone on the kitchen counter, unlocked, screen glowing with a name I didn't recognize, Lars Wineglass. Lars. A man named Lars was in my sauna, drinking my filtered water, wearing my robe, texting my wife with a wine emoji like this was a Nancy Meyers movie. I did the worst thing you can do. I said nothing. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I didn't even slam a door. I put the oat milk in the fridge, sat at the dining table, listened as the sauna turned off automatically. It has a 30-minute timer. I built it and heard footsteps across the tile. Then she came in. My wife. Elsie. Ponytail, slippers, the kind of smile you give someone when you want to not talk about something. "You're back early," she said. I looked at her. She looked through me. I asked who Lars was. She said, "Just a friend." I asked if he was in the sauna. She blinked, once slow. "Oh, is he still here?" Here's the part that broke me. Lars came out of the hallway whistling. Whistling. The man had the audacity to whistle like he was in a toothpaste commercial. Saw me sitting there, then gave me a little wave. "Hey, Grout, right? She mentioned you." She mentioned me. My name. Just a passing footnote in the middle of whatever little Scandinavian-named soap opera this was. I asked him to leave. He didn't even look at her. He just grabbed his bag and said, "No problem. Tell her I'll call her later." He said it to me. Tell her. I'll call her later. Like I was the damn receptionist in my own marriage. I made her a deal. She followed him to the door and stood there, not turning around, just hugging herself like it was me who brought a stranger into the sacred sweat chamber of our relationship. When she finally came back to the table, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I said one thing. "If you ever take him to the beach house, it's over." She nodded. Didn't promise. Didn't deny. Just nodded. Like she was already thinking about it. And that's when I started planning. The next 3 days felt like I was underwater. I'd go through the motions, eat, shower, answer emails, but none of it felt real. The walls of our house didn't feel like walls anymore. They felt like props in a play I wasn't cast in. I couldn't stop thinking about how Lars had moved through our home like he'd been there before. Like maybe this wasn't the first time. Like he'd used that sauna more times than I had. Elsie didn't bring him up. She didn't apologize. She also didn't act normal. She hovered, like she was waiting for something. For me to explode? To pack a bag? I think she wanted me to say it was over so she wouldn't have to. But I didn't. I watched her make tea like she always did, except she stopped putting honey in mine. She folded my shirts, but didn't leave the little dryer sheets in between like she used to. It's funny how you only notice the little rituals once they vanish. It's like grief in slow motion. Then, on Friday night, she told me she needed to get away for a few days. I asked where. She said, "The coast." I said, "Don't." She stared at me, quiet. Didn't ask why. Didn't argue. I said, "If you take him to the beach house, it's done. We don't come back from that." She smiled, and I swear to God it wasn't sad. It was soft. Empty. I need air, Grout. And just like that, she was gone. I knew where she'd go. Our family beach house in Fairhaven, 2 hours up the coast, tucked between eucalyptus groves and tourists with too much money. My dad built that house with a broken back and 3 mortgages. The walls were cedar, the floor was stone, and the front porch was where he died in his sleep, holding a cup of coffee. That house was the only thing that ever made me feel safe. And now she was taking him there. So I drove out the next morning. Left early, before the guilt had time to crawl in. I didn't tell her I was coming. I didn't even tell myself why. I just packed a duffel, grabbed the spare key from under the bird feeder out back, and went. But when I pulled up the dirt road, something felt off. Her car was there, but no other car. No bike. No sign of Lars. At first, I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe she came alone. But as I got closer, I saw footprints. 2 sets. One with boots, his kind. And then I saw something else. The back door wasn't shut all the way. It was cracked open like someone had gone outside to smoke and forgot to pull it closed. Except neither of them smoked. And when I stepped inside, silence. Thick, sticky silence. No music. No water running. No laughter. Just stillness. Then I saw the wine glasses. 2. One empty. One still half full. And a phone, hers, buzzing faintly on the kitchen counter. A message preview lit up the screen. It was from a contact saved as Elise, work, but the preview said, "Tell him. He already knows." That's when my stomach turned. I walked through the house, calling her name. No answer. The bathroom door was open. The bedroom too. I stepped out to the deck, where we'd spent every summer sunset since 2017, and for a second, I thought it was empty, until I heard a muffled sound. Not talking. Not music. Crying. It was coming from the closet in the guest room. I walked toward it, slowly, like the floor might cave in. And when I opened the door, Lars was sitting inside, on the floor, knees to his chest. Sweating. Shaking. No shirt. Scratch marks down his shoulder. Blood on his lip. He looked up at me like I was the rescue crew. "She's gone," he said. "I think she's gone." Lars looked like a man who had just seen the edge of something awful and barely pulled himself back. His hair was wet, but not from sweat. His hands were trembling, his knuckles bruised. There was a deep scratch down the left side of his chest like he'd been in a fight with an animal or dragged through a rose bush. But there was no blood on the floor, no sign of a struggle in the hallway, no broken glass. Just him, crouched in a linen closet like a kid hiding from a thunderstorm. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. My brain was trying to make sense of the visual. The same man who had been smugly sipping filtered water in my robe just a few days ago was now sitting in my beach house, barefoot, shirtless, and terrified. He looked up at me again. I didn't touch her. I swear. I didn't touch her. I asked him where she was. His voice cracked. She went out back, after we argued. She said she needed to breathe. That was around midnight. I waited. I fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, the back door was still open, but she wasn't there. I asked how long she'd been missing. "Since sunrise," he said. "Maybe earlier." I didn't believe him, not completely. I wanted to. But nothing about Lars ever felt real. He had the kind of confidence that felt rehearsed. Like a man who smiled in the mirror to practice sincerity. I helped him up. He winced. I asked about the scratches. He claimed he tripped on the rocks near the bluff, tried to look for her in the dark. Said he slipped and fell into the brush. But here's the part that made my spine crawl. He never once called the police. Never knocked on a neighbor's door. Never used her phone, which was sitting right there in the kitchen, to try to reach anyone. He just waited. Hid. Like he thought I would come. Like he knew I'd show up. And maybe I was wrong. But I started to wonder, was this the plan? Because the more I looked at him, the more I realized, Lars wasn't just scared. He was confused. Like something had happened that didn't fit his version of events. Like the script had gone off page, and now he was improvising badly. I went outside. The back deck was wet with early fog. No footprints. No sandals. No cigarette butts. Nothing to suggest she'd actually stood out there for any real amount of time. But the weirdest part was the garden gate. It was wide open, and the lock was snapped clean in two. Not rusted, not bent. Cut. With something sharp. Clean. I called her name, once, twice, louder. No answer. I circled the property. The shed was locked. The kayaks untouched. But when I passed by the old crawlspace door, the one under the house we hadn't used since the plumbing issue 4 years ago, I noticed the padlock was gone. Not broken. Just gone. There was a faint drag mark in the dirt, like something, or someone, had gone under there. I crouched down. Cold air hit my face. It smelled like mildew and iron. And then I saw it. A flash of red. Her scarf. Stuffed between 2 beams, half covered in dust. And this part will haunt me forever. Twisted like someone had wrung it out. I turned back to the house, ready to demand the truth from Lars, but he was gone. Not in the closet. Not in the hallway. Not in the kitchen. And her phone? Gone too. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring at that crawl space. long enough for my knees to ache and the sun to shift behind the trees. I held her scarf in my hands like it meant something, like it would tell me what happened. It didn't. It smelled faintly of her perfume, citrus and vanilla and damp earth. That mix shouldn't exist. It didn't make sense. Just like Lars vanishing didn't make sense. One minute he was shaking in a closet. The next? Gone. No car sounds. No footsteps. Just gone. And her phone, which I swear was right on the counter when I walked outside, was no longer there. That was when I finally admitted something I hadn't let myself say out loud until that moment. I wasn't in control of anything anymore. Not this house. Not my marriage. Not even my own timeline of events. So I did what any half-broken man with too many questions and too little evidence does. I called the police. They arrived 47 minutes later. 2 officers, one older and half-interested, the other young and trying too hard. I showed them the scarf, the broken garden lock, the open crawl space. I told them about Lars, about the scratches, about how my wife had come out here without me and hadn't been seen since midnight. They asked the obvious. Why didn't you call sooner? I gave them the honest answer. Because I didn't want to believe she was missing. I wanted to believe she was cheating. They looked at me the way people look at someone who's making their job harder, like I was just another husband in the wrong kind of spiral. They searched the property, walked the perimeter, even peeked under the crawl space. Found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No blood. No torn clothing. One of them picked up the scarf with a pen and said it could have blown under there in the wind. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I signed their report, gave them my number, and watched them drive away with the kind of practiced calm that tells you this is far from the worst story they've heard from a house by the sea. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the living room with the lights off, staring at the deck. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind became a breath I didn't want to hear. At 2:17 a.m., I thought I saw a movement near the bluff, a figure standing still. I ran outside barefoot. Nothing. Just waves and wind and a cold that settled into my spine. But the weirdest thing? When I came back inside, the kettle was on. Steam rising. Handle rattling. And beside it, on the counter, was a mug. Her favorite mug. The one that had been missing for weeks. Blue ceramic, chipped at the rim. Inside it, still hot, was tea. And floating at the top, like a ghost of a memory, was one small piece of lemon peel. She always put lemon peel in her tea. Even when we had nothing else. Even when we were fighting. Even when she stopped loving me. If she ever did, she never stopped doing that. I stared at that mug for 10 minutes, then 20. Touched it. Smelled it. It was real. But I never made it. And no one else was in the house. Unless they still were. The tea was still warm when I poured it down the sink. That felt like a betrayal in itself. Like I was erasing her. But the idea of drinking something she made, or worse, something someone else made to pretend it was her, made my stomach turn. I watched the lemon peel swirl down the drain like it was alive. Like it had something left to say before it vanished. I stood there for a long time after that, just listening. Not for footsteps, not for voices, but for anything that might explain why the house was suddenly acting like it remembered her better than I did. It was like the place had absorbed her, and now it was leaking pieces of her back to me in ways it thought I wanted. The scarf, the mug, the tea, all things that didn't belong anymore, but somehow kept reappearing. By sunrise, I was cracked wide open, sleep-deprived, hungry, but the kind of hungry that doesn't come from your stomach, the kind that starts in your chest. I needed answers, but not from Lars anymore. Not even from Elsie. I needed them from the house. I know how that sounds. But grief doesn't care about logic. It just eats away at the parts of your brain that keep you grounded. I stopped trying to be rational around hour 36 of not knowing if my wife was dead, hiding, or watching me from behind a curtain. I went into the basement. Now, it's not really a basement. More like a storage crawl space that got finished halfway. My dad once tried to turn it into a wine cellar and gave up after one summer. It's dusty, low-ceilinged, lined with wooden shelves and boxes we never unpacked. The light bulb down there flickers like it's performing trauma. And that's where I found something that did not belong. A phone. Her phone. Not the one that went missing from the kitchen. No, this was older. Her backup. The one she said she left in a lift last year. It was sitting neatly on a folded towel, screen up, battery still alive somehow, showing a blinking notification. One draft saved. I unlocked it. The code was still our anniversary, even though I was pretty sure she'd forgotten it years ago, and opened the Notes app. There it was. A single unsent note, written 2 weeks ago. If something happens to me at the house, it wasn't an accident. Lars knows more than he's saying. And Grout, if you're reading this, I'm sorry I didn't tell you what the housekeeper said before she quit. That was it. That was all. No signature. No explanation. Just a warning wrapped in a whisper. I stood there staring at those words until I felt the cold draft hit the back of my neck, sharp and narrow, like breath. I turned around. No one. But then I noticed something I hadn't before. A square outline in the wall, faint, but visible if you knew where to look. I ran my fingers along the edge. Hollow. Pushed. A small section of the paneling gave way with a dull creak and swung inward. Behind it, a narrow corridor. Unlit. Lined with insulation. And in the dark, something faint and rhythmic, like dripping. I should have called the cops. Should have run. But I stepped in. Because if there was one thing I now knew for certain, it was this. My wife had found something in this house. And whatever it wasn't finished with me yet. The air shifted the second I crossed the threshold into the hidden corridor. It wasn't just cold, it was wrong. Stale, like hospital sheets pulled from a locked cabinet. The kind of cold that clings to your skin even after you step away from it. I stood there at the mouth of that narrow passageway, holding Elsie's old phone like it was a compass, like it could somehow lead me back to her. I kept thinking about that note. About the way she'd written, if something happens to me. And not, if I disappear. She knew something could happen. She wasn't paranoid. She wasn't spiraling. She was warning me. The flashlight on her phone barely cut the dark. The beam flickered as I stepped deeper in, like the phone itself didn't want to see what was ahead. The hallway was too narrow for comfort, my shoulders brushing insulation and old wood framing as I moved forward. I could feel the house above me, the creaks of the boards, the pulse of old plumbing. It felt alive, but not in the poetic way people talk about old homes. This was different. The house didn't feel like it was holding me. It felt like it was watching me. About 20 feet in, I found what had been making the sound, the dripping. It was coming from a busted copper pipe overhead. But it wasn't water. The liquid was thick, dark, almost black in the dim light. I crouched, touched a drop with my finger, brought it to my nose. Metallic, like blood and oil mixed together. And beneath that smell, something faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. I kept going. The hallway twisted, bent slightly left, then narrowed again until I reached what looked like a dead end, but wasn't. The wall at the end had a section cut out, like a hatch. I pried it open and found myself staring into what could only be described as an old observation room. There was a one-way mirror, cracked on the edges, and behind it, a dim chamber I didn't recognize. Not part of any floor plan I'd ever seen. It was like a room built inside the house, invisible to anyone who didn't know it existed. It had concrete floors, a drain in the center, and metal hooks on the wall. Not violent looking. More clinical. More experimental. I should have left, but I was too far gone. Inside the chamber, I found a journal, bound in cracked leather. I opened it slowly, each page covered in uneven handwriting. At first, it looked like building plans. Measurements. Schematics. My dad's handwriting. Then notes. Clinical language. Observations. Subject responds to isolation with accelerated regression. Subject 3 exhibits dissociation after 48 hours, same as 1 and 2. Subject 4 has stopped eating. My heart was beating so fast I could feel it in my throat. One page was dated almost 30 years ago, and at the bottom was a line that made me drop the book. Do not allow family access to sublevel 3. Keep all entries concealed. The house remembers. The house remembers. I kept seeing that phrase over and over, scratched into the walls. Repeated like it was a prayer. Like it was the only thing keeping whatever this place had buried from surfacing. I stumbled backward out of the room, nearly losing my balance. As I turned, something caught my eye. A shape, moving, fast. I whipped the light around, but saw nothing. Just insulation and shadow. Then I heard it. A whisper. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just tired. It said my name. Not like a threat. More like a plea. Grout. I froze. The only people who ever used my name like that, gently, sadly, were my mother and my wife. And my mother had died in this house. I turned and ran. The crawl space seemed longer on the way out, like the walls were subtly shifting, stretching. Like the house, Didn't want to let go now that I'd remembered too much. When I finally burst out into the basement, gasping for air, daylight hit my face like a slap. I sat on the floor for maybe 10 minutes, maybe more. Everything in me was shaking, but not from fear, from guilt. Because this house, my house, wasn't just hiding my wife's secrets. It was hiding mine. After I came out of the hidden corridor, I didn't go upstairs. I didn't shower or sleep or even think about calling anyone. I sat on the cold basement floor for what felt like hours, staring at the cracked spine of the journal in my lap. I couldn't open it again. I already knew too much. My fingers still smelled faintly like that black liquid from the pipe, and I couldn't stop rubbing them against my jeans like I could scrub away everything I'd just seen. I kept telling myself the same line. It's just old stuff. It doesn't mean anything. But I couldn't stop hearing her voice in my head, soft and echoing from that unsent note. If something happens to me at the house, it wasn't an accident. And now I believed her. Fully. Utterly. I just didn't know what the hell to do about it. Eventually, I made my way upstairs, careful not to touch the walls, like they might shift again if I gave them permission. The air in the house had changed. It smelled sweeter somehow. Warmer. Like someone had lit a candle somewhere, even though I knew there were none. I kept waiting for the tea mug to be back on the counter. It wasn't. Just an empty space where it had been. Like it had never existed. That was worse. The police called again that afternoon. They hadn't found anything. No body. No vehicle footage. No signs of a break-in. Nothing. They were now considering her a voluntary disappearance. The officer used the phrase like it was clinical. She may have just needed to get away. People do. I asked if they'd talked to Lars. They hadn't. No one could reach him. The number she had for him wasn't registered anymore. The car he supposedly drove? A rental under someone else's name. As far as they were concerned, Lars didn't exist. They asked again if I had any reason to suspect foul play. I said no. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want them looking too close at me. At my family. At the house. Maybe I was scared of what they'd find. Or maybe I'd already started to believe that I was the one being investigated, and no one had told me yet. After they hung up, I finally went into the attic. My dad kept blueprints up there, old ones, for every property he built. Dozens of tubes stacked in shelves like wine bottles. I pulled them out one by one, laying them on the floor, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unfurl them. I searched for the original floor plan of this house. I found 3 versions. The first one matched what I knew. The second had additional rooms that were never built. The third made no sense. It was marked SUB 3, Test Access, 1978. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded. But the shapes were clear. A chamber, a corridor, and a symbol that didn't look like part of any architectural legend I'd seen before. A perfect black circle with a horizontal line through it. No label. No explanation. I stared at that blueprint for over an hour. I didn't even notice when the attic door shut behind me. I only noticed when it locked. The old latch slid into place, clean and deliberate. I thought maybe it was the draft until I heard the steps, slow and heavy, on the floor below. I held my breath. Waited. Nothing. No voice. No movement. Just presence. The feeling that I wasn't alone. I sat in the attic until night fell, too afraid to move. The house groaned in waves, as if it were adjusting itself. Every creak sounded purposeful. Every silence worse than the last. When I finally worked up the nerve to crack open the attic door, I crept downstairs like I was entering a stranger's home. And on the hallway wall, the one across from our wedding photo, there was something written in sharp black ink. You left her alone too long. I touched it. It smeared. Fresh. Still wet. I didn't scream. I didn't panic. I just turned around and walked out the front door barefoot, into the cold grass, into the night, and I didn't stop walking until I reached the shoreline. The tide was low. The moon was high. And there, half buried in the sand, water lapping at her sleeve, was her jacket. Elsie's green canvas jacket. The one she wore every fall. The one she always left in the back of the Jeep. The one I last saw 3 days ago. And in the front pocket, zipped shut, was a small, dirt-smudged recorder. Voice memos. 5 of them. Each one time-stamped. Each one recorded after she arrived here. And the last one was from 2 hours ago. I carried the recorder back to the house like it was an artifact. It was warm from my hand, its tiny red light blinking like a heartbeat. I walked slow, barefoot on cold earth, unsure whether I was returning to my home or a crime scene, or both. The door was still open when I reached it. The message on the hallway wall was gone, wiped clean. Either I imagined it, or the house had second thoughts. I sat at the kitchen table, placed the recorder down, and took a deep breath. There were 5 voice memos. I started at the first. Memo 1 to 10:14 p.m. Okay, so this is just in case. Just in case I get nervous and leave or something happens or whatever. Lars is asleep, I think. I didn't tell him about the housekeeper yet. Or the dreams. I'm not sure he'd care. He's not who I thought he was. Her voice shook at the end. It was the first time I'd heard her voice in days, and I hadn't realized until that moment how much I missed the way she paused mid-sentence like she was editing herself in real time. Memo 2 to 12:03 a.m. I found the journal. The one your dad kept. Grout, if you're hearing this, it's not your fault. You didn't know. You couldn't have. But I think that's why the house feels wrong. I think it's still holding something. Not evil. Just unfinished. You always said the house breathed at night. I used to laugh. I'm not laughing anymore. She let out a tiny laugh then, just a wisp. It nearly broke me. Memo 3 to 1:51 a.m. Lars tried to leave. I told him he couldn't. Not until we knew more. He got angry. I think he knows about the room. About what happened there. I told him I wasn't going to keep his secret. That's when he started panicking. He pushed me. Not hard, but enough to make me scared. A long pause. I locked myself in the guest room. I don't think he'll try anything else. He's too much of a coward. Memo 4 to 2:37 a.m. It's quiet now. Too quiet. I'm going to hide this recorder in the jacket and walk to the shoreline. The house won't let him leave either. That's the funny part. I think it only lets people go when they finally stop lying. And Lars, he'll never stop lying. I love you, Grout. That's not a lie. I didn't show it the way I should have. I got scared. I got caught in something I couldn't control. But if I don't come back, I want you to finish what your father couldn't. I want you to let the house breathe again. Let it be something good. It doesn't have to end in fear. Memo 5 to 5:18 a.m. I'm okay. That was it. No context. Just 2 words. Spoken softly. Clearly. I'm okay. I don't remember crying. I only remember the stillness after. Not dread, not confusion, but peace. The kind you only get when you finally stop running from the shape of things. I stepped outside into the morning light. The air was warmer now. Lighter. The garden gate, the one that had been snapped in half, was upright again. Someone had fixed it. I never found Lars again. His real name wasn't Lars. He had no digital trail, no rental record, no paper. I told the police everything. Showed them the crawl space, the journal, the recorder. They opened a case, but without a body, without a suspect, it went cold quickly. But I didn't go cold. I stayed. I fixed the floorboards in the guest room. I sanded down the old cedar deck. I painted the walls for the first time in 15 years. Not to erase anything, but to carry it forward. The way scars are still part of your skin, but don't bleed anymore. And then, one night, just as I was closing up the kitchen, I heard footsteps on the porch. Light ones. Familiar ones. I opened the door. There she was. Elsie, wrapped in a blanket, her hair tied back, eyes swollen but awake. She looked at me like I was a memory that chose to wait. I'm not ready to explain, she said, but I'm ready to rebuild. And I let her in. Not because I forgave her, not because I understood everything, but because the house had already started to forgive us both.